We're now just 3 days away from the much anticipated return to the octagon of both Nick Diaz and Anderson Silva as the main event of UFC 183, scheduled to occur on January 31st. And I've reviewed Nick Diaz's fighting career and posted my review on YouTube. Done the same for Anderson Silva, and now it's time for me to make my my predictions, or what is it that I think is going to happen in this fight. Okay, quickly recap strengths and weaknesses of both of these guys. Nick Diaz, he is a very intimidating fighter. Purposely, he harasses his opponents in the ring verbally, tries to intimidate them. He is skilled in jiu-jitsu, so he's good on the ground, but he prefers not to be on the ground, it seems. He likes to box, and his boxing talent, in a sense, is his ability to pepper his opponent with hundreds of strikes. In a round, I think he has the record for the most strikes thrown in a round in the UFC. Not sure, but he definitely did it one time. And he's also well known for his cardio. Very strong cardio. He does triathlons, and so a lot of his opponents, first of all, they're thrown off guard because of the way that he taunts them, and they don't have the wind to make it through the rounds with the kind of energy level that he brings in. He's constantly on top of them, peppering them with those strikes, and he has a very strong chin, so even if they are very powerful strikers and they are able to connect with him, he can take a punch. He can take a lot of punches. You never see, like, once in a while somebody gets one in that knocks him on his butt, but he's not in knockout mode where his legs are wobbly and that kind of thing. Just don't see that with Nick Diaz. He likes to fight guys, or he's very successful at fighting guys when they are a little bit shorter than him, and when he enjoys the reach advantage. It's not that they all got to be like that, but where we see him having the most difficulty, I think, was with Carlos Condit. Well, he's not the most difficult, but he did seem to present a challenge to Nick because of his height, which he's just a little bit taller, I think, than Nick was, and his reach was on par, and so Nick didn't enjoy the same reach advantage, and so it was kind of a different fight between the two of them. Where Nick really didn't do as well was against George St. Pierre, and George St. Pierre was just outclassed him as a fighter completely, mainly because George is really skilled in kind of all levels. I mean, he's going to take the fight wherever he wants it, and he's, no matter where it is, he's good at that range, and so he employed a lot of takedowns, a lot of wrestling takedowns with Diaz, and was successful in winning those fights. All right, that's Nick Diaz. Anderson Silva. His strengths are that he has a diversity of tools to draw from in the martial arts. He's good in jiu-jitsu, he's good in Muay Thai, he's good in kickboxing, he's got a lot of different techniques, and he's very, very accurate with them. Some would say he was one of the most accurate, or maybe the most accurate fighter, striker ever seen in the UFC. He connects accurately with the things that he throws. The techniques are not performed sloppily at all. He also is an analyst, and so he takes his time. He just doesn't jump into it like a brawl. Usually a good part, over half of the first round, he'll just be analyzing his opponent, trying to draw them in, see how they are going to launch their attacks, but keeping his distance. He might throw some strikes at them to see how they react, but they're not serious attacks. And he might feign to see how they react. And once he's kind of gauged how they're going to respond to things and how they are going to initiate their offensives, then he seems to develop a strategy, and maybe toward the end of round 1, but definitely going into round 2 of his fights, he's going to employ whatever it is that he comes up with, and he usually is able to overcome them right away. End of round 1 into round 2. Later in his career, you see his fights going into round 3, and then eventually going longer into round 4 and 5 even. But what are his weaknesses? Well, where we saw his real weakness was in his fights with Chael Sonnen. Sonnen has a really strong wrestling background, and it appears that if you're a world-class wrestler, that's Anderson Silva's martial arts kryptonite. He's not able to overcome world-class wrestling for the most part. Sonnen was taking him down, grounding and pounding. The first fight they went through, Sonnen did this for 5 rounds, just totally beat up Anderson Silva, and only in the last minute did Silva get a triangle choke and tap Sonnen out. But he really took a beating to retain his title that time. So you see that's one of his weaknesses. That's his biggest kryptonite in terms of technical kryptonite, which is if he fights a real serious wrestler. Nick Diaz is not a real serious wrestler, so there's that component. The other weakness that Silva had going into, especially the latter part of what we saw of his UFC career, was that he started to become arrogant. You know, he began very humble. He never trash talk anybody, this kind of a thing. And he saved it for the ring. He was just going to fight, and his fighting, whether he beat his opponent or not, and how he did it, hopefully very artfully, would prove him the better fighter. He didn't feel like he needed to trash talk anybody. But as he goes into his last few fights in the UFC, you see that change. He's become arrogant. Even his ritual, he was seemed to have a very religious kind of ritual going in. That started changing, where he didn't take care of all the aspects of his ritual the way he usually did. Maybe he thought he was kind of, becoming the immortal. That spirit didn't need that help anymore. I don't know, but certainly in the ring, you see him starting to taunt his opponents, keeping his hands down, acting arrogant, dancing around, being, playing like he's Muhammad Ali or something. And that's when you start seeing him getting his ass beat down. Weidman certainly took the grin off of his face, the little smirk, knocked him out. And then in their second fight, and this is a third weakness I think for Silva, I would say a huge one. Weidman checked his leg kicks, and Silva broke his leg hugely, like terrible, gruesome leg break of both the tibia and fibia. I think they're called those legs in the bottom, or those bones in the bottom of the bottom section of the leg. So, all right, so he's got those weaknesses. So, what do I think is going to happen? All right, technically, hard to say. I mean, Anderson Silva certainly got a larger toolkit in terms of his martial arts abilities. He's got a better toolkit and a very accurate toolkit. Nick is extremely good with his hands and his boxing. He's very accurate with that. And he wears down his opponents with a peppering of punches. Silva's not going to be able to knock out Nick Diaz. You know, I could see them going all the way through the 5 rounds and Silva possibly getting the win by judge's decision, but he's not going to be able to knock out Diaz. I would be very surprised if he could submit Diaz. I'd be very surprised if Diaz could submit Silva. Could Diaz knock out Silva? I think there's a potential he could. We've seen Anderson Silva knocked out before. Nick Diaz is very accurate, and I think there's a potential he could. He's got a strong chin, so I don't see Anderson doing it to him, but I see he could do it to Anderson. Then there's the element of the arrogance, and both of the, like, Anderson had been, Silva had been, you know, so respectful for most of his career, and only in the end did he lose that. I think we'll see him go back to being a respectful martial artist in the ring. Nick Diaz is not going to be that way. Nick Diaz is going to taunt him. Nick Diaz is going to, you know, call him a bitch, and he's going to get inside Anderson Silva's head. Anderson Silva's already got a lot of shit going on in his head because he thought he was invincible, and then he got beat. He got knocked out, and at that point, you know, after the Weidman fight, after his first knockout, you know, when he was interviewed in the octagon right afterwards, he was ready to retire. He was done. He was like, I'm done. He's the guy now, not me. He should have just done that. Then he decided he had to go back in there, and that's when his leg got terribly broken. And that's got to be the biggest mental obstacle for him, you know, going into this fight. Is he has been defeated. He's not going to have that invincibility playing in his mind like he used to have. And I think having that kind of that sense that you are the best, that you can't be beat, was helping him win a lot of fights. He was believing the things that Dana White and Joe Rogan were saying about him when there's, and many other people calling him the greatest martial artist of all time. He's believing that in his mind, and that's actually what got him letting his guard down, and what got him on the start to being defeated. So he's gonna be kind of mind fucked already going into this fight, and then Nick Diaz is gonna give it to him even more. And on top of that, he's had the leg injury, the serious leg injury, and yeah, they, you know, did this surgery on the leg, and all the healing, you know, physiotherapy and all of that he's been doing. But my own opinion, when I saw that leg break initially, the first time, not even after the review of his career, but even the first time that happened, in my mind, and I think in a lot of people's mind, it was that Anderson Silva is done. That's it. Game over for him in terms of fighting in the UFC. That is still my opinion. Yeah, he's back for this fight. I think it's the wrong move. I think he should have retired from fighting. He did enough. He made some records. You know, he taught people some things through his fighting. He showed some things, what works in the octagon for him and what might work for others. I think he should have just left it at that. Going back in the ring for Anderson Silva, I think, is the wrong move. I don't think that you can have that bad of an injury like he did with his leg and return to that kind of world-class fighting that you see in the UFC. I think that is dangerous. I don't think he's ever, obviously he's never going to be the same person psychologically or physically, and I just don't think it's worth it. He could do something else. He could be coaching, training other guys, you know, doing whatever. He could still totally be obviously involved in the sport without having to fight anymore. He's done his fights, did his thing, and we can learn from that. I think going back in with Diaz is silly. He shouldn't do it, and I think he's going to get beat. That's my prediction. I think Nick Diaz is going to beat Anderson Silva. I know a lot of people disagree with me, but that's my call on it. That's what I'm saying is going to happen. I won't be absolutely surprised if it goes the other way, but I think if it does, it's going to do so by judge's decision. I don't think Anderson's going to be able to submit Nick Diaz or knock him out. If I had to put like a percentage on my confidence in what I'm saying about what I think is going to happen in the fight, I would say I'm 75% in Nick Diaz's corner in terms of thinking that he's going to win. I'm 25% in Anderson Silva's, but if Anderson Silva does win, he's going to win by judge's decision. I think Nick Diaz has the potential to knock Anderson Silva out. I'm not necessarily saying that's how it's going to go, but I think the potential is there. So that's my predictions, and in 3 days with time, we'll see what happens.